Hi, I'm Riley.
And I'm Katie, and welcome to Ideal Podcast,
where we talk about the ideal and not so ideal moments going from girlhood to womanhood.
Hi, we are back with another episode. I feel like it's been a while, but we say that every single time, so I think it's nothing new.
But this is the first time in a year that we've recorded, like, in person.
That's insane. Yeah. I was not a fan of the Zoom, and I know we're going to go straight back to that, but oh well. It is what it is. This is like taking me back to our room and like us. I don't know. This is just so familiar. So we are going to do our usual drink rating, and Poppy came out with a new flavor, cream soda. It's this packaging. I saw it at Target and I was like, we have to try it, even though I feel like
it's only at Target.
Yeah, and it's not in all Targets, I don't think. But I don't think I'm gonna like it.
Yeah, I think I'll not like it either.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is literally just like old times. Why do I actually like it?
I like it too. I was telling you that the only time that I've had a cream soda that I absolutely loved was like 10 years ago. This is very close to what that was.
Tastes like you're eating vanilla ice cream.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is delicious.
I love it. Shall I just get into it?
Let's just give a little disclaimer.
Yeah.
I think this is definitely a little bit different from what we've talked about before. This episode might be a little bit more, it's definitely relatable because I think a lot of us have experienced something like this to some extent. But definitely it might be a little bit sad, a little bit exciting.
It could be self-reflective to the point where you're like, I have to like figure out what I'm doing because I'm not doing it right. What were you gonna have a second?
Well, and I just hope that like it makes people feel less alone because, like I said, there is a lot that you can relate to here.
Because this stuff can kind of make you reflect, and if you feel like you're maybe not doing something correctly, don't use that as like, I don't know, don't let it make you spiral, but instead like use it as a tool to be better
yourself. Yeah.
So
now you can dive in. And I'm gonna take another sip because this is delicious.
So I'll start by saying like the context of everything doesn't matter whatsoever. The purpose of this truly is just to talk about finding peace in pain, which, you know, when you're in it sounds impossible. I recently went through something very challenging, and I guess I just felt moved to do an episode about that because I've felt very spiritually connected, and I'll get into a lot of the reasons why that is. And I mean, I just feel like this could be helpful to people, so that's why we're doing it.
And I think that hard situations force us to learn a lot about ourselves, a lot about people, a lot about how the world works and the reality of it. And I think going through hard things and experiencing something like this is common.
And life just happens, and it's part of the process of being a human, I guess, is just going through painful things. But I want to talk about how going through a confusing and painful experience cause you to do one of two things. You can either go through a phase of growth and maturity, or the complete opposite, where you, I guess, just like succumb to your own bad habits, or succumb to like old, I don't know, like flaws in yourself, or like the core flaws to you, or weaknesses, I guess. That's probably a better way to say that. I think the best way to think about it is you're going through a situation. There's two doors. Door number one is locked from the outside and you don't have the key. And then on the inside of the door, is like steel furniture up against the door. So once you even find the key and unlock it, you still are having to like push through to get through door number 1. Door number 2 is just wide open and you can just walk through it.
There's no sunshine there.
It's deceiving. It looks like sunshine. So I want to talk about why going through door number 1 is your best option. It's the hardest option, but it ultimately is the best for you. Utilizing door number 1 to benefit and catapult yourself into the life that you want.
I 100% agree. And I think that choice between door 1 and 2 is when you see who you are as an individual. You can either see that you're someone who's willing to fight and work on yourself and overcome things the hard way, or take the easy path and then have to deal with it the hard way times 2 way later down the line. And I think as human beings, we want to choose the more comfortable path. Same with like Christianity, like how the Bible literally says that if you're choosing God, the road will be narrow and you can't take all this baggage with you. Like that's hard to do, which is why some people don't even want to pursue Christianity, because it takes a lot of work. So yeah.
And I think that painful moments are what shine who you are at your core. And so, I mean, we'll kind of get more into depth with that, but yeah, I mean, I guess to just start the beginning of this year was like super awesome. And I was really, really excited about this year. Yeah, basically. I was really excited about this year for various reasons. And like a couple weeks into the year, it was like, I basically just hit a wall. And it wasn't, the only thing I'll say is it's harder when it wasn't something that you wanted to have happened. At least in the moment. Like in the moment, I didn't want it to happen, obviously. but it was very shocking and confusing and truly contradictory to a lot of other things that were happening, and that's why it was so confusing. And it's almost worse when something happens and you're left with so many questions, because it's much easier to deal with something when you know the reasons why. And so the type A in me is like, or it was like, I have to figure this out. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. But I'll get into how, like, you know, you kind of come to a point where you're just at peace and you're really happy with kind of how things are. So
I can definitely relate to that feeling of having so many questions that you need answered. And I think there are often a lot of things that you wish you can say when something catches you by surprise. The reality is that healing and finding peace takes a very long time. And I think for me personally, there was a moment where it took me multiple years, 2 to 3 years literally, to only start to feel like, oh, I'm finally getting to a place where I feel like I can accept the situation for what it is. I think forgiveness is one of the hardest things that you can go through. And if you don't deal with it right away and correctly, it will hold on to you forever. It's like this weight. It literally feels like a weight on your shoulders that you're carrying with you everywhere, every single day, every decision, every little thought. Your life revolves around that. And you're only setting yourself free by forgiving.
This is why door number 1 is so important, because allowing yourself to actually deal with the feelings, and not even just dealing with it, but because when you're feeling such deep emotions, you have to like navigate it. Like, you can't just be like, okay, I feel this, let me either go avoid it or go rot in it.
It's almost like you're planning how you're gonna go through it. Like, you have to be so intentional, because Like, you have to catch yourselves in moments of slowly backing out of door 1, number 2, and going into number 2, whether that's, I don't want to get too specific, but like, you just have to see where you are the weakest, I guess, and then think, okay, how can I get stronger? You know, it's like going to the gym. You know, like, it takes time, and your muscles it's gonna take a while for your muscles to grow, and so yeah, you have to be very intentional.
Yeah, and I won't get into the science of all of it in this episode, because then this episode would be hours long, but you are truly rewiring your nervous system when something bad happens to you. And so, kind of just going off of that, I think finding peace truly starts with like your core principles, your core values and morals, but also like your core habits too. And so it takes strength and dignity and like internal purpose, I guess, to have the strength to go through door number 1, because sometimes it's not, I mean, being self-reflective isn't always fun. And I think a lot of the times when we're avoiding a situation, it's not even just the situation, you're also avoiding yourself. And so, you know, there were moments where I wanted to just say, like, F it, like, I'm going to go through door number 2 because this sucks. And navigating this and doing the things the healthy way sucks. Figuring out which door to go through, you have to ask yourself, what are your flawed habits? Are you an avoidant? Are you anxiously attached? Do you easily slip into depression or anxiety? And do you have the self-control to make better choices when you have habits, or are you not as strong mentally? And I know that the values and principles instilled in you, especially from a young age, will truly guide you through, painful scenarios. And if you're lacking those, which, like, not everyone has instilled morals and principles, like they weren't raised a certain way. But I think if you truly like want to be better and you're lacking those principles, you have to find the mental strength and use the situation to create the principles. Because the longer that life goes on, and the longer that you're in door number 2, and the longer that you're succumbing to bad habits and basically reinforcing bad behavior, you're not going to be able to break those habits anymore. And that's going to seep into your next relationship. That's going to seep into your next friendship. You're not going to be able to communicate well. And it's just going to keep bringing up the same problems over and over and over again. And who likes repetitiveness? Nobody. So it is much better, again, to just sum it all up. It is so much better to just go through door number 1 and make those good habits and keep yourself accountable. So
actually, I wonder, this is just a thought, I don't know if like I fully believe this, but do you think that when you feel like you're the victim, you feel less of a push to go through door number 1 because you're like, I didn't do this, like, why should I have to deal with this? So like, I'm just gonna take door number 2 because I didn't cause this to happen.
That's so interesting.
That's just a thought.
I would say I'm the victim of the situation.
You are.
So I would say I think that as a victim of a situation, you have to work harder to go through door number 1, because again, like, if the situation is confusing, there's so many other emotions to it when you are the victim, like, that you have to figure out. Because, yeah, I mean, like you said, like, when it was either the doing of someone else or the situation or the friend or whoever, it was their doing, I guess, they can reconcile that. Like, they have to. But when it's not self-inflicted, you have to really do like some soul searching, because it's like it happened to you.
Because it feels unfair.
Yeah, it does feel unfair.
It feels like, how is it that this person can move on and like feel like it almost feels like they just fall right back to, or not, like get right back to the path that they were on and move on, and then you're just stuck in this mess of emotions and this fires me up.
I really, well, I think that also just comes down to, because truly, even when someone's not the victim, they still have the choice of what door to go through, but they may or may not choose door number 1. You know, and I think that victims to certain situations can actually take that as motivation to go through door number 1, because for me, it was like, okay, once I got over the stage, so yeah, obviously I went through all the 5 stages of grief. Once I got through the stage of like shock and like confusion, and I kind of moved on from that, that's when like something just clicked, and I was like, there's no way that this just happened to me and I'm sitting and gonna do what? Nothing? No. Like, this happened to me. That wasn't fair. So I'm gonna get my butt up and like do something productive, because I'm not gonna let a situation that happened to me dictate my actions and how I live. So yeah, I'm gonna go through door number 1.
This is why I feel like oftentimes, like, if you go through something traumatic, you see that the victim like glows up and like completely like transforms their life and does so much better than they did before, because like you said, it's motivating. It's like, I am not gonna be this sad little victim. I am gonna get up and do something about it, like you said. And I think it's also important to, like you said, see the purpose in it, because it's funny, today God has a sense of humor, because we were at church today.
You will see how God has a sense of humor later.
You'll get into it. But one of the things is, like, we're sitting at church and literally everything that the pastor was saying was like, I was like, ooh, I should say that on the podcast. But he was talking about how when we experience traumatic circumstances in life, love that verbiage, God desires us that we evaluate our situation in the light of who he is. And I think it's also good to remember that if you're living a righteous life and you're following Christ, he never wants to put you in a situation that's going to hurt you and ruin you. And I think that's what the big kind of purpose is, like, for you to pull yourself out of that situation, that maybe there's something that God is either trying to teach you, or he's removing you from a situation that is toxic or is just not good for you in the long run. And sometimes it's hard to see it that way, that like that maybe you weren't in the right situation. Like you said, like we were talking about it, that you almost gaslight yourself. You're like, the situation isn't as bad as it could be, or as it really is.
So so I connected this episode in the beginning to being spiritual, because this section I have titled "Be Careful What You Pray For," because they will be answered, and when they are answered, sometimes it's a slap in the face. And I say that I don't... You're gonna sneeze?
I think I'm good.
Okay. I was going to say, I don't regret ever praying for anything, but I think I have underestimated
the power
of it. So let me give a couple examples to kind of just, like, I hate when people online are dramatic and they're like, oh, I had this super like crazy experience and it was like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, or like they use Christianity as like a place to like have drama and whatever. So that's not what I'm trying to do.
Or whatever.
So about a week after the situation happened, right after the situation happened, I was praying a lot, obviously, and I was just asking for clarity because, like I said, so confused, blinds, like it was just very confusing. So I kept asking for clarity because I wanted to feel at peace about it. This was like very, very soon after. And then about a week later, almost exactly, someone had reached out to me. I had no idea who this person was. They shed some light on some information that, again, that was also shocking. But that was clarity in itself about the situation. So that was one thing that happened.
Just like put this into perspective, literally like someone random reaching out to you and telling you things that you would probably never know.
Yeah.
If they wouldn't have reached out is actually insane.
Yeah. And
they didn't
have to do that. They didn't know me. It was like a friend of someone. Like, it was just super random, and getting the information was like incredibly painful. But like, after kind of mulling over it and talking to like my parents and everybody, I was like, okay, this is like what I need to hear, even though it's hard. And I know God is, telling me what I need to hear and showing me what I need to be shown. Mm-hmm. That's the first situation. Mm-hmm. The second situation was like, literally a couple days later, I walk into a restaurant.
It was like the next day or something.
Like everything kind of happened right after the next.
And I was just getting long paragraphs every single time something has happened.
Well, because it's like, God really said this wasn't enough for her. Mm-hmm. Which honestly, he's right. He's right, because sometimes it takes a couple times for me to be like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I walk into this restaurant and I sit down and I look to my left, and there's a big painting, and it just says, "This is about to get so much better." And I was like, all right, whatever. Like, coincidence. Yeah. Sure. And then the waitress comes over and she just starts talking, and she looks at our table and she says, "Life is about to get so much better." And I'm like, oh, okay. And the night doesn't end there. At the very end of dinner, an old guy comes up to our table and he says, "You are so lucky, because the next 60 years of your life are going to be so beautiful." Aww. And I almost had to like excuse myself because I was like, okay, this is obviously God telling me that everything is going to be okay. Mm-hmm. So that was like, I've had two forms of clarity from God. The first being like a slap in the face, and the second being like a hug. So I'm getting the two best forms of clarity that I could ever need. And then the last sign from God, which was the next like stab. I don't know. How do I say that? Like,
I guess a stab that was worth it.
A stab that was worth it.
I guess like a pinch.
Yeah, so
a painful pinch.
Almost
a pinch, and you have very low pain tolerance.
Almost exactly a week later, I was in class, and another person reached out to me, which was also a little bit random because I know this person, but I don't talk to them consistently whatsoever. So, and the context of the situation, like how this person got this information, was the most random part about that, which I'm not going to get into. But what they told me and how they found out was like the nail in the coffin, and just like, okay, that's it.
It's no longer a pinch, it's a stab.
This is obviously like, none of these things are a coincidence. The context of the situations are just like too specific. And that was just kind of like my point of where I was like, okay, there is no way I'm going through door number 2 after all of this, especially because God has never been so clear to me ever in my life. And I've obviously been religious my whole life, but I've never really been spoken to. I feel like that truly just felt like God was putting these situations in my life to speak to me. Going through door number 2 wasn't only not an option for myself, like, because I didn't want to go through door number 2, but it was like, if I had gone through door number 2, I would not only be letting myself down and also my family and my friends, but at that point, I also felt like I would be letting down God at that point, because he showed me all of these things. I have to take that and like rise, you know, like I have to rise. So like God showed me all of this, as painful as it was, not to go sit in my room like a loser, not to go behave and do things that make me look like a loser, but I mean, truly for a greater purpose in myself, and also a greater purpose for God's glory as well. So,
and I think a good thing to remember that was also mentioned at church today was that these circumstances don't last forever, you know, and that this is just a small part of your life that will either make or break you. And it's a life lesson that you can eventually pass on to other people. And I don't know, you could just learn a lot from it.
So after ultimately getting myself up and deciding to go through door number 1, I poured into myself. I did all the productive things, doing a bunch of cycle classes and studying extra, being off social media, spending time with quality people. And I think this is where like having the dream team of like your support system really matters, and where I am very proud to have built such a foundational support system in this, because this is where, I mean, it truly counts. And so if you have a good support system, then cater to those people's strengths, because, you know, like this also, like, this has definitely brought me closer to basically everyone in my life. And so like cater to your family and friends' strengths. So like if you're feeling down about yourself and you need someone to like be super aggressive and tell you to like get up and, you know, speak very intensely to you, then go to that person. Like if you need someone to just listen to you, go to that person. If you need someone that's just going to give you sound advice, go to that person. And so I am very happy that I have like the greatest dream team ever. And it's almost been like, not shocking, but I was almost, I don't know, it was just incredibly motivating.
I mean, it makes sense. Like it's inspiring to see people show up for you in the ways that they did.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to, because I feel like when something like that happens, you want to keep to yourself oftentimes. And I think that's the worst thing you can do. Like, you have to share the situation as it is. Yeah. And also, like, if these, because it comes in waves. And I think, like, even if, let's say, a year goes by and an emotion from that situation comes back, instantly you have to go and share that and, like, share it with someone who understands you and is not going to be like, oh my gosh, you're still not over this, you know, because like it takes a while, you know, and like I feel like there's so many times where I had to come to someone and be like, I still feel this way, you know, and this is like 2 years later.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like, if this person truly cares for you, they're not going to criticize you or think that you're insane for feeling the way that you are.
Yeah. One thing that my dad told me was, he said, I am here as many times as you need to just go around the merry-go-round and talk about it a million times, but like as long as you understand that can only be like a fraction of the time that you think about it, because you really have to shift your mindset about the situation. And I don't know, I guess just, I mean, I guess I'll get to the whole accepting part of it. But I'm so proud of myself that I'm like not crying, because Katie flew to see me the very next day, and like
that was actually so crazy that happened.
Yeah, that weekend was just like very special, and like the amount of flowers and cards and phone calls, and just like everything is very like, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say anything else about it because I'll cry. I think a key component to the accepting part of it, which is kind of where I'm headed, is how you view yourself. So that is also an issue with like being the victim, I think, because with the confusion comes with like you're questioning yourself. You're questioning not only the situation, but, you know, like, did I do something wrong? Like, was it all a lie? Why would these happen if like this wasn't true, or like things like that? And so I think that you just have to trust yourself. And again, like, that dream team is going to build you up and help you stay focused on your worth, because I think that's what really matters. And so when you remember your worth, you don't underestimate your strength as much as you would when you like don't trust yourself and you're confused. I think when you also remember your worth and you take accountability for yourself, you're also less likely to use the pain as an excuse to make bad choices. Because I feel like when you connect with yourself over a situation, then you're going to keep yourself accountable. Like, yes, this sucks and it's not fair, but like, don't let the temptation of a terrible situation allow you to do terrible things or act stupid or just letting yourself and other people down, because it's just not worth it.
Do things that you'll regret later.
Yeah, don't embarrass yourself. Go do something productive. And that's honestly the hardest part. But once you do that and you get into the habit of being productive after an awful situation, it's like a flip will switch and you'll jump to acceptance, because you've found that in yourself and you've found that in the people around you and you've found that in your spiritual life. And I mean, that is the hardest part, is just sitting with it. And like I've said, just navigating the hardships of those feelings. I think after getting through a situation, you have to ask yourself, and this was kind of like me teetering on the line of acceptance, can I look back on the situation and still wish that it hadn't have happened? And it was just like, no. Like, I'm glad that this happened. You know, once you go through a situation and you come out of it, you gain so much perspective. I know that like everyone says that.
It's just true.
But it's just true. And so having that perspective and looking back, I'm so thankful for it, because I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't change anything. Like, I'm glad I was the victim, because I think I'm better off this way.
Yeah. I think saying that takes a lot, because, and I feel like when you get to that point, you have to choose to let go of everything. Yeah. You know, like you choose to let go of unforgiveness, of pain, and it's like, it happened, I learned, and I came out on the other side feeling so much better than I was before.
Yeah. And I think that the biggest lesson is just that peace can always be found in yourself. You're strong and capable, but you have to do the work to get there. Like, in real life, okay, say I went through door number 2, I would eventually find peace, ?
Probably
like,
not
temporary peace. But then maybe like 6 months from now, it would always be lingering because I never dealt with it. Yeah. And so
I think it might even lead to like bad habits and things that you literally stick to for the rest of your life, because you're numbing things that you just didn't deal with from the start.
And if you can look back on the situation and be really proud of yourself and happy with how you handled something, I think that that's also key, because that is a major drive for how I behave in general. I feel like I don't want to look back and be embarrassed of myself or be like, man, I wish I didn't act like that. Because it's just like, why? And I think that when you know that you deserve more and confident that you'll get that, then it's like, okay, bring it on.
Yeah.
Well, what's next?
Yeah.
And being the victim too, Like, I think in the moment, it's significantly harder. But then you get to be like, this literally is not on me. Let me just
chill.
And I think, like, being the victim, you have the perfect opportunity to be the person that that person wasn't to yourself. Be the friend that that friend wasn't to yourself. Let yourself grieve and process, because you deserve to move forward and not let things linger.
You owe it to yourself. You owe it to because yourself. You just went through something so traumatic and painful. Like, by taking these steps and choosing door number 1, you are making your life so much better in the long run.
And once you hit that acceptance stage, like, you will be so happy. Like, my cup is overflowing. Truly. Like, I'm so glad you didn't look over at me at church because I was crying. But because it was like, I think it was right before the sermon started, and he was just like, reflect on what God has been doing for you.
I was emotional too.
Okay, let me just reflect.
Honestly, because later in the sermon, one of the things that he said was like, our eyes should be on Jesus and not our circumstances. Yeah. And I think most of us, our circumstance becomes our God, where that's all we think about, and we forget about who God is, what the truth is, you know, what he can do. And I think, just like Riley was saying, at church before the sermon started, it was the worship leader told us to close our eyes and to just think about the goodness of God in our life. And I was like, man, I don't do this enough.
If I did that more often, I'd cry every day.
Yeah, because truly, like, if you're going through something hard, sit down, get a piece of paper, and write down, like, I'm not even kidding, like 10, 15 things that you're thankful for and that God has blessed you with yesterday, this year, since the day you were born. Like, you know, just there's so many things. And I think when we look at Jesus in hard situations, we realize how blessed we are despite how painful our situation is.
I'll kind of connect this back in a second, but don't let your pain be a waste, because everyone's pain is used for a greater purpose, like, already. So to let your pain just be wasted on, like, BS stuff, that, like, door number 2, to waste your pain in door number 2 is such a disservice to not only yourself and your family and your friends, but to God, because there is a greater purpose and you're not using it. So,
not that this person took anything away from you. It feels like that. It feels like they took the world away from you, but they didn't.
Huh? It did feel like that.
It did feel like that.
It doesn't feel like that anymore.
Yeah, but the reality of it, they took nothing away from you. And in a way, like, how I see this, like, defeat, where it's like you choose not to deal with these situations, like, you're literally letting them take even more away from you than they really are. But obviously no one's taking anything away from anyone, but, like, if you think about it hypothetically, like, don't let them take away the things that you have left post situation.
Well, that's like part of being the victim too. Like, once I got over shock and confusion, like, it already feels like so much was taken from me. I need to just, like, completely flip my mindset and my attitude and understand that, like, okay, number one, no one can actually take things away from me, but I can't let myself take things away from me. I'm not gonna, because going through door number 2 is taking away things from yourself. I really think that, because I can walk away from the situation and say, I have the respect of myself still. I have the dignity of myself still. I have the integrity. And I don't believe people who go through door number 2 can say the same.
This is giving me deja vu, because I feel like we talked about this on, like, our second episode. Because I remember saying that I'm so happy I went through the difficult moments of my life, because I would not be who I am today, you know? Man, I think we did talk about that in the second episode.
And I kind of want to conclude which, like, I think I always kind of knew this, but no one had ever said it to me before. It was actually in my religion class recently. He said that, you know, God feels pain, and he feels all of the emotions that we feel, but he just acts them out perfectly because he is perfect. And so when we weep, God also is weeping with us, and that's kind of comforting in a way. But also, not only will putting faith in his greater purpose give you so much more peace, especially after the clarity that he's probably giving you. But I came across this analogy about like hitting rock bottom. Like sometimes we have to hit it to remember that God is the rock. And I think that leaning into the rock and remembering that is so much better than like pushing away from the rock and like trying to not even figure it out by yourself, but I mean just walking through it alone, I guess.
Yeah. And I think it's just comforting to know that he's stable. Yeah. That like he's not like us where we're like jumping up and down from one emotion to the other. There's like a stability in him and in our faith.
Yeah. And this was also said in church today, and I had this written down before that God satisfies us in the deepest level that's possible. And I think but that's only true when we like dig for it. I've obviously searched for satisfaction in God, but not to this level. I think this was like I've reached bottom type of thing.
Which people often say, like, it's easy to trust God and follow him when things are good, but the second that things get hard, people tend to just...
Yeah. You know. I mean, because I even told you at one point, there was like a day or two, like probably the week that this happened, that I was like angry spiritually because before this situation happened, I was praying for things, and it was like, oh, I'm praying for clarity on like the unknowns of life and all of these different things. So I was mad that
you got the clarity,
that it's like I got other clarity that I didn't want. So I think what I was praying for wasn't what I
had in your mind.
Wasn't what I had in mind, and I think that that's important because God will fulfill our purpose and create our paths, and it may not be in the way that we want it to be. But I think that when you do dig that deep, it will be answered. And I think that finding peace within yourself is easier when God has shown you why, or he's showing you true colors, or the flip side of a situation, or the aftermath, or whatever the case is. And so when you're soul searching, I think you're also like, you should be asking for clarity because I think it helps you move on.
Sometimes it's good to hear the hard truth.
So, and he'll either tell you directly or indirectly. In my case, I think it's been both. I think the last thing that I'll say is, forgive yourself, because it's very challenging, and there will be days where you hey, maybe I do want to spend half the day in bed, and that's okay, but you do have to get up. And I also want to conclude by saying that forgiveness is always meant for yourself, because forgiving lets yourself be at peace. It's not about the other person. It's not about the other situation. It's always about you, and it's about being able to reconcile everything. And so forgive for yourself. And, I forgive not because I'm letting things off the hook or I'm accepting behavior or I'm saying that that's okay, but I'm forgiving because I want to be at peace and I don't want to be hurt by the situation or, all of that. So, whoosh.
There it is. Which actually, I don't remember where I wrote this. I might have skipped a part that I wrote. But I think with unforgiveness is like you're literally living in a prison. Like it feels like a mental, emotional prison that just is so toxic and is not good for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Or so it is.
Thank you so much for listening to this a little bit longer episode. It was very important to me to talk about this just because I felt like this could help someone either spiritually or just like on a personal level. And I hope that we say this every episode, but truly like this out of any other episode, I really hope that you can take at least one thing and apply it to your life, because I think that things like this really define who we are, and it can be so easy to let yourself go. And I think you have to really fight for yourself. And so I hope that you got something from that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.